Hello, 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 and we are live. Please write me just one comment to make sure that you can see me, you can hear me, you can see the presentation, and we'll be ready to get started. Just one comment that audio and video works fine. And where are you from? We have Poland, Trapka Zdrój, we have Greece, we have USA, Czech, Ostrava, Lithuania, India. Excellent. Just please write a comment that you can hear me to confirm that audio and video is working, and we'll get started. We can hear you. Excellent. All good. Audio and video is okay. Can you enable subtitle? Unfortunately not. As far as I know, I cannot do that on my streaming service, but the subtitles will be available later once the stream is ended. We will do AI magic to generate subtitles. So welcome to Android Architecture the Simple Way webinar masterclass. Today we're going to talk about Android and Android architecture. So plan for today is that we'll discuss challenges in modern Android development. We'll talk about best practices or good practices. We will open the next edition for the Android Architect program, and we'll have a Q&A session. My name is Jarosław Michalik. I'm an Android developer since 2016. I'm a Google developer expert in Kotlin, and on my daily job, I work as a consultant. I help my clients overcome legacy projects. I do a lot of stuff with legacy Android apps. So Android architecture is quite an important topic, and mastering the concepts of architecture can lead to senior, lead, and architect roles. But the rapidly changing landscape of Android development makes it challenging to stay up to date. We'll explore the simple ways for Android architecture. So let's get started. As you know, staying current in Android development feels like chasing a moving target. And we have new recommendations from Google every year, and we have a lot of new libraries, and those libraries are great, but it's easy to feel overwhelmed. And we have this constant flux of new stuff, and it can lead to confusion and just inefficiency in our development. Therefore, we need to find a way to navigate these changes effectively and focus on what truly matters. And what truly matters, building great products for our users. So understanding these challenges is the first step towards becoming better Android architect. So the other issue is when we are following every recommendation that Google makes. It can lead to a cycle of constant rewrites and unnecessary complexity. And on the flip side, completely ignoring recommendations or reinventing the wheel can be equally problematic. So both extremes, following every recommendation and completely ignoring recommendations or reinventing the wheel, can be equally problematic. But both extremes result in inefficiencies in development and maintenance nightmares. I suppose you worked with some projects that someone wanted to reinvent the wheel to create custom dependency injection, custom annotation processor, custom library for MVVM, and so on. I had an opportunity to work on a project where where everything was custom. And well, we need to find a balance between adopting useful patterns, useful libraries, and making stuff on our own. So the key here is to being pragmatic and choosing what works best for our specific project. And sometimes recommendations from Google don't really make sense. Let's take an example of how Google wanted to define domain layer in their recommendations. So we have a concept of domain layer in clean architecture from Uncle Bob. And this Uncle Bob architecture, domain layer in Uncle Bob's architecture, is something else that Google is mentioning in its architecture doc. For example, Google suggests that domain layer is optional, but in a clean architecture, this layer is core of this architecture, and when we are thinking in terms of clean architecture, we don't create domain layer for reusability sake. So we need to be pragmatic. Now let's talk about writing smart code, because that is also an issue many development teams are facing. So writing clever, complex code might seem impressive at first glance. If someone knows where this snippet comes from, please write in the comments. I'm interested if you know this particular abstract class interactor. So yeah, writing clever, complex code might seem impressive. And it can be tempting to showcase your skills, your knowledge of Kotlin through these intricate solutions. But if you can't explain your code simply, or it requires extensive comments, you might be overcomplicating things. Therefore, the solution is to focus on writing clear, maintainable code that others and your future self can easily understand. Because this smart code, writing clever stuff, may reduce your team productivity. It can increase onboarding time for new developers. We don't often think about that case. How fast can you onboard new developer to your project? Okay, and this is important for senior and lead developers thinking about that stuff, thinking in terms of onboarding people. So yes, smart code can introduce higher risk of bugs and regressions, and in general difficulty in maintaining that code base. So there may be some signs that you are writing this smart code. If you can't explain it simply to a colleague, to, for example, junior developer or someone who just started working with Android, this may be the sign that you write this smart code. If you need to put a lot of comments to understand this piece of code, you are writing smart code. If you are using idiomatic language unnecessarily, you are writing smart code. If you are solving problems you don't have yet, again, this is smart code, and probably you don't need that. So remember the words of Uncle Bob, remember the words of Martin Fowler, that good programmers write code that humans can understand. Okay, because compiler will take anything, but for the human to understand this piece of code, it's another pair of shoes. So we have this example of some base use case. This is typical example of smart code. So what do we have in here? We have some kind of timeout. We have dispatchers.io context. We are wrapping this. We are wrapping response from this use case in a result class. We are catching some exceptions. We are retroing these exceptions, and there is a lot of complexity. But sometimes in our use case, we need to do just simple Boolean check or simple mapping. And when we are using base class for all of our use cases, we have this complexity of timeouts, of managing exceptions in a use case where we simply need to make one check, one validation. So we often don't need that kind of smart code. So let's go back to this original snippet. Is it one of the Jake Wharton's projects? No, this is one of Chris Bain's projects. So most of you were close. Okay. We talked about problems we have in our code bases. So now we maybe can talk about some solutions, some good practices for our code. And adopting good architectural patterns can transform our development. And techniques like MVVM, MVI patterns, separating layers into modules, and writing clear use cases can greatly improve our code base. Okay, so for example, in here we have an example of MVX pattern. This is a view model with state flow. So MVX patterns like MVVM are fundamental to modern Android architecture, and adopting MVVM with stateflow because it's useful with Compose, can greatly improve our app's structures and testability. But implementing these patterns incorrectly, on the other hand, can lead to bloated view models and tight coupling. So what should we do in that view model, in that MVX patterns? We should focus on keeping our view models, presenters, interactors free of Android framework dependencies, and use some kind of observable classes for our UI states. So the goal in here is to separate concerns, separate presentation and UI. The goal is to separate these concerns, improve testability, and not blindly follow a pattern. So next thing is module separation. And modular architecture is a powerful way to organize our code bases. And separating layers into modules can improve build times sometimes, but it can enforce clear boundaries between our modules. But improper module separation can lead to circular dependencies and increased complexity. Therefore, we should use those gradual dependency configurations to enforce module boundaries and keep interfaces in our domain module. So we have this approach that in domain, we are defining interfaces, and in our data module, in our UI module, we are implementing those interfaces. With this approach, we have a clean decoupled architecture, which is easier to maintain and test. When I was starting learning Java, it was 2015, 2014, something like that. They told me that inheritance is amazing. Java is object-oriented language, and we can make abstract classes. We can make interfaces and implement these interfaces. And yeah, inheritance is a powerful tool in object-oriented programming. And it can seem like an elegant way to share functionality between classes. But overuse of inheritance can lead to rigid, hard-to-maintain code structures. Therefore, we should favor composition over inheritance, especially in Kotlin. We can utilize Kotlin interfaces and extensions to share functionality. In here, we have an extension for viewModel log error. Sometimes we could be tempted to put that kind of error logging in our base class to create base view model, but we don't need that. With inheritance, we create base classes, and with composition, we are thinking in terms of plug and play components. And this approach makes our code more flexible and easier to refactor in the future. Next thing, and I'm amazed that not every Android team is doing that, because continuous delivery, continuous integration are crucial for modern development, and automating our builds, tests, and deployment can significantly improve our team's productivity. But poorly implemented CI/CD can lead to build failures and reduced team confidence. Therefore, we should define clear executable criteria for passing builds and automate as much of the testing process as possible. And if we have some flaky tests in our CI/CD, we should fix them as soon as possible, because if we allow flaky tests in our CI/CD pipeline, we will lose trust in our pipeline. Okay, next thing is use cases. And yeah, I actually like useless use cases, like in here. And they are key components in clean architecture. And well-written use cases are describing our business logic. They are describing our business logic in clear manner. So, but overly broad or poorly defined use cases, like we had an example a few slides ago, can lead to confusion and unnecessary code duplication. Therefore, when we are writing use cases, I like to focus on single responsibility for each use case and clearly define inputs and outputs. And with this approach, we create a more modular and understandable code base. And again, base classes inheritance can seem like a convenient way to share functionality. And they are often used to reduce code duplication across similar classes. But overuse of those base classes can lead to inflexible hierarchies and hidden dependencies. How many base fragments you have? How many base activities you have? Therefore, again, we should prefer composition over inheritance and use those Kotlin interfaces, Kotlin extensions to share functionalities. And this approach, believe me, is more flexible and maintainable in the long term. And next thing, it's not so popular in Android development world. It's more popular on the backend side. I mean, domain-driven design. It's an approach to software development. It's a software philosophy, I think. And in Android development, in mobile development, we can incorporate DDD elements to help. Those elements can help align our code with business requirements. Fully implementing DDD can be overwhelming, especially for existing front-end projects, such as mobile projects. But the one thing we can do at zero cost, almost no cost, is aligning our classes, our naming with our business domain. So when we have some kind of class for invoicing in our project, we don't create some PDF invoice. We don't create some kind of weird ID, UID. We try to reflect the naming, the language we use in our product. We are reflecting this terms, naming, language in our code. So every developer, mid developer, senior developer, should start investing time in understanding business domain of the products we are working on, and start to use ubiquitous language in our code base. In ideal world, we should have the same naming for our classes in Android, in iOS, on Django backend, on Java backend, in our cloud functions, whatever. And this is why we are creating domain, which is domain module in our Android project, which is not dependent on Android frameworks. We can use proper names. And the goal here is to create software that reflects and serves the business domain. So this is how I encourage you to think about domain in your application. Domain is something that reflects the business domain of your product. And you saw that I wrote in there good practices, not best practices, because I don't believe in best practices. I believe in useful patterns. So we have these patterns, but we don't have to adhere to them all of the time, okay? Because they serve us, we don't serve the architectural patterns. The other thing is to remember to think in terms of high-level design, how the class we are working on aligns with business needs. And it's also important to remember that we should design code not just for machines, but also for humans. So now let's go to the weirdest topic, but most exciting for me, which is legacy code. And when you hear legacy, what you think? You think, oh, it's something I don't want to work on, because legacy seems like a challenge. And we have the temptation to rewrite everything from scratch. And this temptation is strong. But complete rewrites are risky and often impractical. Therefore, when we are starting with legacy code, we should start by thoroughly assessing the current state of this legacy code base, to analyze the existing architecture, to identify pain points and document current dependencies to create some kind of foundation for incremental improvements. So in here, we have an example of some legacy manager that is doing everything. And modernizing that kind of code base requires a strategic approach. And while you might want to fix everything at once, that's rarely possible. But making changes too slowly can also leave you stuck with outdated systems. Legacy equals async task, of course. So we have some patterns to replace legacy components piece by piece, minimizing disruption while steadily improving our code bases. And legacy code often lacks proper test coverage. And without tests, making changes to our code base becomes risky and time-consuming. And adding tests to legacy projects can be challenging due to tight coupling and poor design. But adding tests to legacy projects, unit tests for refactor components is a must. So we can refactor a little bit, introduce dependency inversion, then use dependency injection, so the testing will be possible. Prioritize writing unit tests for new and refactor components, and implement some kind of integration tests for critical paths to ensure system stability. So the other thing is to work as a team on our refactoring our legacy code. So it's useful to make additional time for regular refactoring. You can do this for a few story points during the sprint. You can introduce static code analysis. And the most important thing when working with legacy stuff is education. You should inspire your team to follow Boy Scout rule, to create unit tests, even if at first glance it seems like something impossible. And yeah, simplicity is key. We talked previously about this smart code, but we are stuck with legacy in here, okay? So we want to simplify things, not to introduce new base classes. And what really matters at the end of the day is delivering value for our users. And that's the most important thing we should remember when we are writing any kind of code. So just before we go to the Q&A session, let me take a sip of my drink, and please write in the chat, did you enjoy this part of our presentation? Was it time well spent? And yeah, it was good. Excellent. Nice. I see that not that many people talks about fighting legacy stuff, and even identifying few points that are not discussed frequently is quite important. Very informative. Thank you. So now let me present you the Android Architects program. This is educational program designed for developers looking to up their skills. And it covers comprehensive modules on all aspects of Android architecture. This program focuses on high-level design thinking, just as we discussed during this webinar, and pragmatic architecture approach. So if you want to accelerate your career growth towards senior, towards lead or independent consultant positions, this program may be right for you. So with Android Architect, you learn new things, you practice this strategic thinking, and you learn to navigate those changing recommendations, and you learn to apply design patterns effectively. But you know that many developers struggle with over-engineering, this not invented here syndrome, and that's why we are teaching this pragmatic approach to architecture, which will result in avoiding these pitfalls. You gain the skills to lead and architect large-scale projects with confidence. And this program, of course, covers the basics, such as MVX patterns, such as clean architecture, but that's not all. We talk about domain-driven design elements. We talk about tools for quality. We talked about mobile DevOps. And I think that this domain-driven design module is one of the best modules I did for this program. So with this comprehensive approach, you will be prepared to tackle complex architectural challenges and go from developer to team leader. And yeah, the core program is packed with content, and further to enhance your learning, we have bonus materials. Yes, the real world applications we are working on can seem like a challenge, but we have this Android Architect support group. We are including office hours recordings. You get templates, cheat sheets to solidify your learning experience. You have access to library of apps, audits, projects, showcases, and if something new is added to the course, you get this update. And with this session, we are offering more things. We are organizing 3 additional sessions with practical DDD workshop. This will be event storming workshop for designing new functionality to the app with this high-level design thinking. We will have a webinar about architectural approaches to Kotlin multi-platform mobile, and we will also have an additional Q&A session, which will be open floor for you to ask any question that was not previously discussed on our Discord channel. The regular price for this program is $5.99, but we want to make this resource accessible to developers, and therefore till the end of this week we have price of $2.99. So I think it's a good opportunity to transform career at the fraction of regular cost. So how to enroll? It's a simple process. You are visiting website androidpro.io/architect. You are clicking this big shiny enroll now button, and you get instant access to course and to our Discord channel. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but for early joiners, we have 2 additional courses. We have analytics course, and we have testing Curtin's Masterclass recording. So I think it's a good occasion. So if you're wondering if this program is actually for you, it is for you if you're looking to transition to more senior roles, from junior to mid, from mid to senior, from senior to lead, or to independent consultant. But even if you are unsure if you are ready for this, you can just go to our website, check what students are saying about the program, and if it's not enough for you, we are offering full refund within 14 days. No questions asked. If you decide that this program is not for you, okay, no hard feelings. I send you your money back. So we have in here a risk-free opportunity to explore the content of the course and decide if it's the right fit for your career goals. So there are many resources available for Android developers. I'm sure you know many people that are talking about Android development, that are doing tech talks, that are writing articles, and those articles are great. I am friends with people who make Android content, and you should totally use their content to learn Android development. But some programs I found often lack the comprehensive structured approach needed in mastering architecture from this senior developer, lead developer perspective. So the Android Architect is in-depth curriculum focused on practical high-level design. And you can start immediately with this program. So go to androidpro.io. I will write this on the chat also. And in there, you will also find a form. You will find the instructions to ask your team leader, to ask your company for program financing. Okay, so in here we have the link to the sales page for this program, and now we can proceed to Q&A session regarding today's webinar content and this program. I see we have some comments in here. Oh, thank you very much, Baturai. Baturai actually joined the first edition of this program, and we talked a lot about Android development during those sessions. So yeah, he's the right person to ask about this program if you have any doubts. Okay, but for Q&A, we have a question. Do you recommend extension functions for data mappers? I see some people are against them because it's not easier to test them. Okay, so let's say we have a mapping function that needs an additional dependency. For example, time formatter that comes with Android framework, for example. Or you need in your mappers, for some reason, you need to access application resources. So when you are defining data mappers in extension functions, it's not so easy to inject some dependencies into them. And if you are mapping from your domain layer to your presentation layer, you sometimes may want to use some dependencies for your mapping classes. In that case, go with class mappers, but if you have just simple mapping from one object to another without very complicated logic, then you can go with extension functions for that. So my recommendation is that you should just ask yourself what fits better in your particular case. Okay, we have a question about base classes. If base class requires some values, properties to execute common functionality, how would you change it to extension? Okay, so if a base class requires some kind of property, it's probably this property is part of the class state. And if you have that kind of state, you can introduce Kotlin class delegate. I don't have an example for that, but okay, I have an example for that, but this is in code base protected by NDA, so I cannot show you that right now. But the general pattern is to create additional class that is implementing some kind of interface, and then in your class that was previously base class, use a class delegation from Kotlin. So you say that your class is implementing some interface by class implementation. I will make a post about that. So I will write it down because it's a good thing to post on LinkedIn and on newsletter. So thank you. The keyword in here is class delegation. Okay, we have some other question. I have an app that works fine until sometimes after I updated to Android version 14. The first thing I would do in here is to invalidate cache and restart, and test this on uh, a few versions of Android Studio. But sorry, without additional details, I'm not sure if I can help you right now. Okay, we have another question. Is it a synchronous masterclass? This masterclass, yes, we are doing this synchronously, but recording will be available on the YouTube channel for a few days later. And Christos, I think you are in our community, so the recording will be later put to our Edu platform. What's the validity of this course? Is it for 1 year, 2 years, or something else? With this course, you get updates for 1 year. If I decide to add something to this course, you get this update at no additional cost. For example, people who joined during the first edition, almost exactly 1 year ago, now are invited at no additional cost to new edition, to those additional webinars on our platform. Is it a Jetpack Compose course? The answer is no. During with our code examples, yes, we are using Jetpack Compose, but we don't focus on the Jetpack Compose itself. I think during some office hours, we were debugging issues with Jetpack Compose, but it's not the main part of this course. Okay, if you have any other questions, please write on the channel. I have 15 seconds delay or so. Okay, we have another question. What should be the proper approach to map API response to DB and domain? How to handle the communication between domain and DB layer? So let's go back to the slide with the Uncle Bob clean architecture. So this is giving us the dependency rule of how we should structure our calls. So in the middle, we have domain layer, and to access domain layer, we should go through some through other layers, through use cases, controllers, and so on. So in ideal scenario, in clear architecture, you will get the data from your API, you will map this to your domain layer, and then some kind of use case or repository will map domain layer objects to database objects. And again, if you want to map some DB objects, you map DB object to domain object, and then you map domain object to API object. So each time you have to go through this domain layer to ensure data consistency. This domain layer entities use cases should be your core driver for your architecture design. Okay, we already had this question, but we have also a response. We have a response that you most likely need to write custom date serializer. Okay, we have some issue with splash screen API. And to be honest, I haven't used this new splash screen API, especially with Jetpack Compose. So I'm not sure I can help you with that right now. That it's funny that you have duplicated app bar, but maybe something is not rendered properly. I'm not sure if I can help you without looking at the code. How about case when API, domain, and UI model have some properties? And that's a very good question. Let's say you are working with Kotlin X serialization, you are working with JSON or Moshi, and in here you have an annotation. You have an annotation that this JSON value should be user underscore name. And okay, it's fine. You have this annotation in your API module. But once your API changes, for example, it will be split into user first name and user last name. You can still have full name in your domain object. You can still have full name in your database object, because when some kind of change happens in here, you will only have to refactor or rewrite one mapper for that function. So if you want to follow the clean architecture guidelines, you should still have 3 modules. You should still have classes for API, for domain, and for UI. But I'm not sure if you know, but it's not mandatory to write Android project with clean architecture. If you are doing small project and you just want to create an app and push it to the users, publish it to Play Store, it doesn't matter if you will use the same model in all 3 layers. But if you are structuring your code with this idea in mind that many people will work on that code base, then I would recommend actually creating 3 separate classes in 3 separate modules. Is there any way to get input data from Work Manager, which we said will set input data while adding to Work Manager queue? I'm not sure. It was some time. I haven't worked with this Work Manager for some time. So unfortunately, I cannot help you with that right now. Okay, so I think this is it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming today to this architecture webinar. I hope that you feel inspired to write pragmatic, simple code. And remember that you can join the full Android architect program and learn even more with this approach. Again, thank you very much for spending this evening with me, and see you later somewhere else in the internet. Thank you very much. Bye.